Sheen, Jim, and yeah. This is how we write it. Sheen, how to pronounce the letters with short vowels. Fath, Kasr, and Dam. Sh, She, Shu. This is how we write Sheen at the beginning of the word, like this example. Shukr, which means thanks. And this is how we write Sheen at the middle of the word, like this example. Fashal, which means failure. And this is how we write Sheen at the end of the word, like this example. Mishmish, which means apricot. Let's see the next letter. Jim. This is how we write it. Jim. How to pronounce the letters with short vowels. Fath, Kasr, and Dam. Ja, Ji, Ju. This is how we write Jim at the beginning of the word, like this example. Jannah, which means heaven. This is how we write Jim at the middle of the word, like this example. Najm, which means star. This is how we write Jim at the end of the word, like this example. Thalj, which means ice. Let's see the next letter. This is how we write it. Yeah. How to pronounce the letters with short vowels. Fath, Kasr, and Dam. Yeah. Yi. You. This is how we write ya at the beginning of the word, like this example. Yad, which means hand. This is how we write ya at the middle of the word, like this example. Feel, which means elephant. And this is how we write ya at the end of the word, like this example. Qatari, which means a male from Qatar. Kaf and Qaf. This is how we write it. Kaf. How to pronounce the letters with short vowels. Fath, Kasr, and Dam. Ka, Ki, Ku. This is how we write Kaf at the beginning of the word, like this example. Kareem, which means generous. This is how we write Kaf at the middle of the word, like this example. Aks, which means contrary. This is how we write Kaf at the end of the word, like this example. Malik, which means king. Let's see the next letter. This is how we write it. Qaf. How to pronounce the letters with short vowels. Fath,
كسر and ضم.
قا قي قو. This is how we write قاف at the beginning of the word, like this example. قلب, which means heart. This is how we write قاف at the middle of the word, like this example. فقير, which means poor. This is how we write قاف at the end of the word, like this example. ساق, which means leg.
غين
And
خاء غين. How to pronounce the letters with short vowels. فتح, كسر and ضم.
غا غي غو. This is how we write غين at the beginning of the word, like this example. غريب, which means stranger. This is how we write غين at the middle of the word, like this example. رغيف, which means loaf. This is how we write غين at the end of the word, like this example. دماغ, which means brain. Let's see the next letter. This is how we write it.
خاء How to pronounce the letters with short vowels. فتح, كسر and ضم.
خا خي خو. This is how we write خاء at the beginning of the word, like this example. خبير, which means expert. This is how we write خاء at the middle of the word, like this example. بخار, which means steam. This is how we write خاء at the end of the word, like this example. مخ, which means brain.